only tools you need on here are the 2 wrenches for the, or a wrench and a socket wrench is what I'm using for the bolts and lock nuts. I'm using 5/16 by 3-inch bolts. You can also use M8 by 70 millimeter bolts, and this is, and mine is a 1/2 inch wrench for these bolts. And I have 3 washers on here because it's a little bit longer than the 70 millimeter M8 bolts that you would use otherwise. And the only other tools I need is the one for the socket head for the Allen wrench for these M5 by 25 millimeter screws and M5 by 20 millimeter screws. The 25 millimeter screws are on the outside of the plate here. I've got one all together so you can see how it goes together. And the shorter M5 by 20 millimeter screws go on the main plate. This is what I call the main plate, and this is the back plate because it's the back of the extrusion. You also need 4 wheels altogether, but I'm going to talk about the parts just for one side, so it didn't get so many of them. So you got 2 80-tooth 3D printed wheels, and I've got 6 O-rings on each one of the wheels. The O-rings are number 328 O-rings. There's also a metric equivalent I've got in the bill of materials. And all this stuff is, all the parts that you buy are in the bill of materials. The bearings I've got on each side of the machine. I've got 608 2RS bearings, 2 on each of the wheels, and 2 for the bearing holders that the M8 smooth rod goes between. I also got a little spacer here on the back plate. As you can see here, it's gray here. I think it should show up in the video. But yeah, so this plate here. And you don't really need that. It does get the bearing closer to where the pulley is, so that it's good in that respect. It gives a little bit. And if you got a shorter M8 rod, my rod was just a little bit shorter, so this actually worked out better. Just have it on there. So I got more of the rod into the bearing. Let's see what all the parts we have. And we got one closed looped GT2 belt. It's 240 teeth, and that's on each side. So there's one on this side and one on the other wheel. And that should about cover it. Oh, the spacers. There's one big spacer that goes between inside each one of the wheels, between the bearing on each side, that keeps them from crimping up. And then there's one larger spacer on the top of the that's the top of the wheel, which is on the back plate, and one shorter one that's against the main plate. Alright, let's start putting it together. We'll start with the wheels. And these O-rings, you just start at one end and just sliding them on there. Nothing special about it. Yep. So don't drop it. Wow, didn't hurt to drop it. It's all plastic and rubber. Alright, that's all the O-rings. So let's put one bearing in first. Doesn't matter which side, whatever fits. And I'd print some sample prints first of these bearing holders. That's the one that's the critical. You want them as tight a fit as possible. Not too loose, but not too tight as you want them kind of tight, probably tighter than what I have them, just so they will. It's a better connection. I've got them a little looser because I kept taking this apart all the time. So that's fine. I'll leave it like like that. We'll just do that part first. And as we put the wheel plate on, Alright, yeah, the first thing we want to do is put the wheels on this plate. So if we look at this, and you want to put the nuts, the lock nuts on the outside, so if you want to change these O-rings down the road, or to use a 3D printed tire on there, it's easy to just pull that plate off and those two bolts off, and then you can put them on there. That's the only thing you'd have to take off of there. Otherwise, if you did it on the side, you'd have to take all the wheels off. So let's see. We'll start with the. Starting with the bolt on this side. I've got one washer against the bolt head. And these are because I'm using the 3-inch bolts, which are a little longer. It's about 75 millimeter. The short washer, and you want the shorter side against the wheel bearing, so it connects against the inner race of the bearing, and the gear teeth go against the main plate. In the same way, we got the tapered spacer goes against the bearing. See, already made a mistake here. This does not want to go. This wants to go the other way because you won't be able to get that. You won't be able to get that T-nut in there very well if you do that. Alright, see, I already made one mistake and I had all this stuff to go by. Alright, the teeth go against the plate. And this goes against that. I've got 2 washers on this end. And a lock nut. Alright. Now this is going to be the back of it, so I want to go ahead and put the belt on here before I put the other wheel on there. And you can also, if you get it on the wrong wheel, at this point you can just move it around like this. It's easy to do that. But it just needs to be inside one of those wheels to start with. This you can kind of turn up to begin with while you're getting that, until you have to put it the final thinner on the back plate. See, and I got the correct side of the spacer on there. I just barely put the other one on. I'll tighten them both up at the same time. And at this point we can tighten them up, I believe. I got everything on there right. That's facing that way. That's facing the correct way. Yeah, looks correct. It's always good to check as you go along, as I found out. Oops. set to unloosen all these when I took this one apart a while ago. And just kind of snug tight. This is all plastic, so it's, you don't want it real tight. Alright, that's on there. And we'll put this bearing. Make sure you get the orientation of these correct to match this. The part I have now has a bigger slot here, so you don't need to worry about the bearing rubbing against this. That's one initial reason I made this spacer, was so it kept it away from that. And you want to make sure you have it oriented correctly. It's upward, like you can see them like that. And this one takes the longer screws. And it doesn't really matter which side you put the bolt on, but you know, I'm just being consistent. That's the way I'm doing it. These will want to stay loose until you put the M8 rod on there, because it can adjust. It actually is going to be centered in that slot based on the belts that I used. But we'll tighten it up just a little bit, just so the nuts don't come out. Just to engage the lock nut. Those slides. Oops, oh, there again, I made that mistake again. The bearing, open bearing, wants to be to the plate. So as you can see, it's easy to get something incorrect. The key is to catch it early on. So, sides, you can see the whole bearing wants to go against the plate. And it might work that way, it's just the bearing over time might fall out of there. If it's a really pressed fit, it would probably be alright. But it's safer not to do that. And that part is actually easy to change until you put the M8 rod on there. It's easy to fix that before. But once you put that M8 rod on there, it's going to be a little more difficult. These are the M5 by 20 millimeter links, and this is the part you can see the bearing against the face. want just a little bit to engage the lock nut so the bolts don't fall out before we get it all assembled. And that's the wheel assembly. So this has 2 T-nuts on the main plate from the bottom and 4 on the back plate holding it together. And we also have on the front of this back plate, the front 2040 V-slot, we've got this idler assembly. It holds the idler for the carriage. There's one of those on each side. And we'll start putting it all together.